Hi, and welcome to Jessica's Pie Hacks on Pies Are Awesome. I am Jessica, and today's pie hack is how to cut pie dough. Now you're probably thinking, Jessica, I already know how to cut pie dough. Why am I even watching this? You need to open your mind, man. Because believe it or not, you can get crazy detail like this out of your pastry crust by following my 4 simple rules for cutting pie dough. What are these rules? Let's dive right in. Rule number 1, keep it sharp. Rule number 2, keep it cold. Rule number 3, plan the direction of your cut. And rule number 4, press, don't pull. Now let's take a look at rule number 1, keep it sharp. What do we mean by that? Well, it's fairly self-explanatory, and if you're like most people, you've got a couple of sharp knives in your house already. Most people have one of these, a basic kitchen paring knife, and most people have one of these kicking around in their garage somewhere, a basic utility knife. These will do the job, more or less, when you're cutting detailed pastry work, but if you want really fine detail work, what you're going to want to invest in is one of these, a precision blade or fondant cutter that's food safe. The reason why these are so great is they have a nice little grippy handle that makes it very easy to control, unlike the big clunky utility knives, and the blade is separated from the body, so you don't have to worry about dough gunking up in here. The other thing that's fantastic about these is you can replace the blade as they get dull. So unlike a kitchen knife, which you're not going to be wanting to replace every couple of days, these little blades you can replace after every bake session if you want to keep things super sharp. Now I did start out using the basic kitchen knife for my work, but I switched over to the precision knife fairly quickly, and this was one of the first tools I invested in because it became apparent so quickly that there was such a huge difference between working with a really sharp knife, especially as the dough starts to heat up and get a bit sticky, versus a basic kitchen knife. On to rule number 2, keep it cold. Now for those of you who've made pie before, you know that heat is the enemy of flaky pastry crust. The fat in the dough starts to break down. It has a very low melting point, and the more you work with it, the more gummy and yucky your pastry starts to get. Now this is a problem for the nice flaky taste that we want to get, but it's also a problem when it comes to cutting fine details. The longer that our dough is left out, especially under studio lights like this, the harder it is to get precision cuts into it. So what I like to do is keep my work on a movable cutting board or a parchment-lined baking tray so that as things start to heat up and get a little bit sticky, I'm able to pop the entire thing into the freezer for a few minutes and then pick up with my work again. I've got 2 different squares of dough, one that's been just freshly taken out of the freezer and one that's been sitting out for a little bit. So I'll show you just quickly what the difference is when you're trying to cut something precisely. So with the dough that's been sitting out for a little bit, you're getting a little bit of a pull and bend at the end there. With the dough that's been in the freezer, you'll notice when I get to the end, no pull. Quite a big difference, as you can see. The dough that's been left out for a while drags and pulls as I drag my knife through it, whereas the one that just came fresh out of the freezer holds its shape much better. On to rule number 3, cut direction. Now, no matter how cold you keep your dough, it's not going to act like modeling clay. It's still going to pull a bit in the direction of your blade. So one of the ways that we combat this is by being aware of the pull and intelligently choosing the direction of our cuts to compensate for that pull. Now here's an example. I'm going to cut a long, skinny line through this very soft dough that's been sitting out here for a while. So I've got my sharp knife. I'm going to start with the long lines, and then I'm going to cut the 2 little end pieces. You can see there's a little tiny bit of pull at the edges there because the dough's a bit soft, but generally speaking, I've got the shape that I want. Now I'm going to try cutting in a different direction, and you're going to see what a big difference cut direction makes. I'm starting now with the little edges, and then I'm going to do my long pieces. All right, the first one works okay, but now watch what happens when I start the second cut. As I pull my knife down, because this cut has already been made, it's allowing the dough to pull back as I cut. And so you can see the result. Same length. In fact, this one was a little bit longer, but the pieces that I cut out, one is significantly shorter and goofier looking than the other one because I didn't consider the direction of the dough pull before I planned out my cuts. So that's rule number 3. Be aware of the drag of your dough and plan your directions intelligently. Rule number 4 is related to that, you might have noticed that when I was doing the long cuts, I dragged my knife through the dough because it's got room to sort of bend and flex and stretch because there's lots of dough down here. But did you notice that when I cut the little top areas, rather than dragging my knife across, what I actually did was I pressed straight down to prevent the dough from stretching. This is something that is absolutely critical if you're trying to do anything tiny. Dough has a maximum fidelity of about maybe an inch where you can get away with dragging your knife through it before you're going to obliterate your fine detail. So if you're doing anything smaller than about an inch square, you need to cut this way. I'm going to cut two different shapes. One where I'm pressing directly down and one where I'm dragging my knife around to trace the shape, and you'll see the big difference that it makes. So first way, I'm going to try to cut a little pie symbol. I'm going to drag my dough, my knife, around and sort of just freehand a little shape here. And look how the dough's sort of mooshing up and doing its own thing and being kind of weird. All right, wonky little pie symbol. Now I'm going to do the same type of shape again, but this time I'm going to press directly down with my blade. So boop. And when I'm turning the corner, I'm also still pressing straight down. Boop. And now I'm doing little jiggles of a bunch of different straight downs in a row to get the curve shape. And another straight down here. And I'm going to cut out the surrounding shapes so that I don't get any pull when I lift it up. A certain amount of patience involved in pastry cutting as well. You've probably figured out by now. All right. So check out my two little pie symbols. One, I just freehanded and I let the knife drag through. And the second one, I took a little bit more time to press the knife directly into the dough. This is a technique that I use a lot in pies like these, where I really want the fine detail to be retained, and I have a lot of different shapes to cut out that I want to look exactly the same. This type of cutting takes a little bit of practice and a little bit more time to get right, but you'll be extremely surprised with the results you can get. Incredibly fine little tiny details by just taking that extra second to press directly down rather than drag through. So there you have it, my 4 secrets for cutting pie dough. Keep it sharp, keep it cold, plan the direction of your cuts, and press, don't pull. If you follow these 4 simple hacks, you'll be getting crazy detail out of your pies in no time. I've got loads more pie hacks and secret tips to share with you. If you'd like to see them, please hit that subscribe button so I know you care. And I will see you next time.